Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. My name is Muhammad Ridzwan bin Jamislan, and for today I will be presenting the final year project Progress, which is association between body composition and metabolic syndrome among UNISA students aged 18 to 19 years old, and I am supervised by Dr. Ridzwan. For the table of contents, we will have the number 1, background of study, 2nd, research objectives, 3rd, methodology, 4th, result, 5th, discussion, 6th, conclusion, and 7th, references. For the background of study or literature review, metabolic syndrome or MET-S is a clustering of medical conditions that can lead to chronic diseases which can be screened through fasting blood glucose, blood pressure, and large waistline. This is from NHLBI in 2019. Second, hypertension is the major cause of premature death worldwide, thus being diagnosed with MET-S increases the danger greatly due to the other conditions grouping in as well by CDC in 2020. Last but not least, obesity, insulin resistance, and high blood pressure are components of the metabolic syndrome by JAM called Cardiol in 2010. So we move on with the second, which is research objectives and hypotheses. The first research objective is to determine the body composition of UNISA students aged 18 to 19 years old. The second research objective is to determine the prevalence of metabolic syndrome of UNISA students aged 18 to 19 years old. And the last research objective is to determine the association between body composition and metabolic syndrome among UNISA students aged 18 to 19 years old. For the hypothesis, there is a significant association between body composition and metabolic syndrome among UNISA students aged 18 to 19 years old. Next, for the methodology or study setting, the study design is cross-sectional study. The period of the study is from 1st November 2021 until 31st March of 2022. The study location is at University Sultan Zainal Abidin, UNISA, Gong Badak Campus, Kuala Nerus, Terengganu, and the reference population is UNISA undergraduate students aged 18 to 19 years old. For the source population, UNISA and undergraduate students aged 18 to 19 years old in Gong Badak Campus. For the study participants, students from diploma programs and foundation in health science and medicine or PUSPA in UNISA, Gong Badak Campus. And as for the ethical approval, the ethical approval that has been approved to me is UNISA Human Research Ethics Committee or UHREC with the code UNISA/UHREC/2021/264. For the sampling frame, it is students from diploma programs and foundation in health science and medicine in UNISA, Gong Badak Campus aged 18 to 19 years old. The sampling method used in this study is systematic random sampling, and the variables under the study is dependent variable, which is metabolic syndrome, and independent variable, which are age, BMI, gender, and body composition. For the research measures in this study, for the socio-demographic characteristics, we took the age, which is aged 18 to 19 years old, gender, which is male or female, ethnicity, which is Malay, Chinese, Indian, or others. For the faculty is from FUHA, FSK, FREE, FBK, FYP, and PUSPA. For the inclusion and exclusion criteria in this study, the inclusion criteria is aged 18 to 19 years old, both gender, healthy, no physical disabilities and mental health, and also as a Malaysian nationality. For the exclusion criteria, we do not take any athletes, any participants that involved in weight reduction program or diet restriction, and participants that have chronic diseases. For the anthropometric measurement, we measured the height, the weight, BMI, BIA, and waist and hip circumference of the participants. For the biochemical measurement, we have phlebotomies to take measurement of the participants, which are the total cholesterol, triglycerides, and HDL-C. As for the clinical measurement, we take the measurement of the systolic and diastolic blood pressure of the participants using Omron HEM 7203 device. As for the statistical analysis of this study, IBM SPSS version 21 was used for the data analysis. Data described as descriptive and inferential statistics. P-value of greater than 0.05 was considered to be statistically significant and confidence level of 95% was used. Normality of the data was tested with Shapiro walk. Numerical data will be presented as mean with standard deviation, while categorical data and demographic variables were presented as frequency and percentage. The prevalence of overweight and obesity were tested with descriptive analysis whereby the age, weight, height, BMI, waist circumference, and BIA will be presented in mean with standard deviation. Tests of independent t-test used for comparison of body composition between male and female were used. For the degree of association between body composition and metabolic syndrome, binary logistic regression was used. For the results, which is socio-demographic characteristics, we have the table 1 here to show the mean with standard deviation for age of the male, female, and total participants. And as for the subjects, there are 88 subjects that gives consent, but only 80 subjects that participated. So for the response rate, it is 90.91%, while the dropout rate is 9.09%. Here we can see the figure 1 that illustrates the ethnicity of the participants, which is 100% from Malay ethnic, and the figure 2 which illustrates the information regarding the number of participants studying under which faculty. So here in table 2, it shows the anthropometric characteristics of the male, female, and total participants in mean and standard deviation. And the parameters that are involved in this table is weight in kilograms, height in meter, BMI in kg over meter squared, and waist circumference in cm, as well as quad scan BIA, which involves the free fat mass and fat mass. For table 3, it shows the biochemistry characteristics of the male, female, and total participants in mean and standard deviation, and the parameters in these biochemistry characteristics are triglycerides in mg/dl, total cholesterol in mg/dl, HDLC in mg/dl, and systolic blood pressure, as well as diastolic blood pressure in mmHg. Now we move on with research objective 1, which is body composition. So here you can see the result for the body composition of UNIZA students using Asian BMI cutoff value for the normal weight, overweight, and obese. And besides that, we can see the figure 3, which is a chart that illustrates table 4 information. Here we can see table 5 that shows the difference of the body composition in body mass index between male and female participants. In this table, we can see the BMI mean for male and female and the difference in mean for both of them, and the p-value, which is 0.232. So it is analyzed with independent t-test. So note that independent t-test, the p-value is significant at lower than 0.05. So with the p-value being more than 0.05, the body mass index versus gender is not significant. Next, we move on with the research objective 2, which is prevalence of metabolic syndrome. Here we can see that table 6 that shows the prevalence of metabolic syndrome of UNIZA students aged 18 to 19 years old. There are parameters, which is waist circumference, triglycerides, HDLC, hypertension, and metabolic syndrome, as well as the cutoff value. So the cutoff value are based on IDF in 2005. In the table, we can see that there are 3 participants that has the metabolic syndrome due to the cutoff value, which is 2 or more than 2 of parameters above, including waist circumference. Next, we move on with research objective 3, which is association between body composition and metabolic syndrome. Next, we move on with table 7 that shows the association between body composition and metabolic syndrome. So based on this table, we can conclude that BMI is a positive, which is 0.335, and significant because it has the p-value lesser than 0.05. So it is positive and a significant predictor with the OR or odds ratio, indicating that for every 1 unit increase on this predictor, the odds of metabolic syndrome increases by a factor of 1.396. As for the age, it is a negative because of negative 1.485 and a non-significant value because the p-value is more than 0.05, so it is a negative and non-significant predictor. If the predictor had been significant, then the negative coefficient will be taken as an indicator that females, which is coded 1, are less likely to get metabolic syndrome compared to male based on gathered data. So here in table 8, it shows the metabolic syndrome and associated factors. So the variables which are independent variables, which is age and gender, and there is also metabolic syndrome and no metabolic syndrome for the participants. So for the discussion, in terms of body composition, female participants had the higher percentage of obese compared to male participants by 6 or 7.5 participants, with obese being BMI more than 25, following WHO Asian BMI cutoff in 2020. This is accurate according to NHMS 2019, which mentioned Malaysia has female being the highest in obese among the sex at 54.7%. Normal weight has the highest percentage between all body weight status with 66.25% combined for both gender in this study. And there are lesser participation by 19-year-old students with only 10, which is 12.5% participants, while the others are by 18 years old students. For the ethnicity of the participants, it is not considered in the study as all of the participants are only from one ethnic, which is Malay ethnic. In terms of biochemistry characteristics of the participants, 8 participants have hypertension, which is systolic blood pressure, which is more than 130 mmHg, or diastolic blood pressure more than 85 mmHg, consists of 4 male and 4 female participants, which follows the WHO in 2021 statement where it stated that 1 in 4 men and 1 in 5 women had hypertension. As we can see that the ratio of male participants having hypertension is higher than female participants in the study. For HDLC, 1 out of 8 participants that has lower HDLC as per classified by IDF, being an indicator of metabolic syndrome, is male, while the other 8 are female, with the value being lower than 40 mgdl and lower than 50 mgdl respectively for both genders. As for triglyceride, there are no participants with metabolic syndrome criteria from IDF, which is more than 150 mgdl. Analysis done for association between body composition and metabolic syndrome, as well as independent t-tests to compare BMI between male and female participants, are insignificant. This is probably because of the big difference between number of sample size calculated and number of participants, which is 269 to 80 participants in this study. Next, we move on with the strength and limitation of the study. So for the first strength of the study, it able to provide data on association between body composition and metabolic syndrome for UNISA students aged 18 to 19 years old. For the second strength, it is able to see the prevalence of hypertension, obese, and metabolic syndrome with measured data for the participants that involved in this study. For the limitation of this study, the number of participants, which is 80, is much lesser than sample size calculation, which is 269. So the effectiveness of study might be affected by the number of participants. So in conclusion, obesity, hypertension, high systole and diastole blood pressure, and low high density lipoprotein cholesterol increases the risk of metabolic syndrome, on par with Bradley et al. 2017 that said cross-sectional studies frequently found positive associations between metabolic syndrome and body weight. This study was able to find a number of participants that are at risk of metabolic syndrome and the ones that are eligible to be diagnosed as metabolic syndrome with the race mentioned above. The third one is there is association between body composition and metabolic syndrome among UNISA students aged 18 to 19 years old. Last but not least, this study failed to reject null hypothesis. These are some of the references that are used in the making of this final year project. Thank you.